The sun's down, the soldering iron's hot, and you know what that means. Welcome to Night School, where the zip ties are tight, the code is questionable, and the LEDs never sleep. Hosted by the one and only Bobby, the professor of Pixel Mayhem. We're diving deep into lighting tips, tech fails, sketchy workarounds, and the secrets nobody teaches until now. Whether you're mapping props at midnight or just here for the chaos, this is your crash course in RGB enlightenment. So grab your beverage of choice and remember, there's no syllabus, no rules, and no guarantee we'll make it out with all our fingers. This is Night School.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Night School. Tonight we're going to have Ron Armstrong. He's going to be going over troubleshooting our shows. And I would like to, this is a great sacrifice he's making. Please, if you have any questions, put them in chat. We will answer them as much as we can, as quickly as we can. So let me get Ron up here. Hey, Ron.
Hello, Pixel World. How's everyone doing tonight?
And Ron, right off the bat, I'd like to thank you for doing this for us tonight. Yeah. The Chiefs are on right now, so hopefully you won't be too distracted.
I got the phone. I'm ready. Win. No, guys, it's glad to be here. Glad to be back again for one more Night School episode. And, like Bobby had mentioned, we're going to be going over some troubleshooting, at least in my thought processes on troubleshooting on the many shows I work on. So hopefully this is a great one for you guys and help solve some of your problems if you're running into them. But you ready to go ahead and get started or like? Yeah, and if you want to watch for any kind of chat and stuff, absolutely. Just let me know.
I'll let you know if I see it
started. Any questions? Glad to have them. Of course, we'll also be watching for comments and everything after the fact. So we'll do our best at responding to any questions that come up if you're not happen to be watching this live, if you're watching it recorded. And we'll talk a little about where to find additional help if needed. Let me know when you're ready to get started, Robbie.
Oh, you're good to go.
I'm good. All right, fantastic. So, everyone, so today is like October 13th. So hopefully for anyone who's doing like Halloween shows, you're already up and running and everything is going fantastically smooth for you. For everyone else, if you're not happening to do Halloween shows, maybe you're starting to get things out, but brush the dust off and start getting things figured out and remember everything you did last year to make your show work. So hopefully this is perfect timing to go over some kind of basic troubleshooting. Tonight, we're really going to focus on just some of the basics of troubleshooting. We'll talk a little bit about some common misconfigurations that we see. If you don't happen to be catching us live, if you are, ask away all the questions. Be glad to stop and answer what I can. After the fact, just know that there's plenty of help out there. Here at Matos Designs, by the way, we do have paid for consulting help. This is not an advertisement for that. Just know that there's that one-on-one help that is available, as well as the live Zoom room. I do both direct consulting work and in the xLights Zoom room, I've spent thousands and thousands of hours in there helping shows all over the world for the last several years. I first got in also in Facebook in those groups. Lots of great help out there. I kind of hang out in all of those groups as time allows, and happy to help solve any problems you run into. A little bit about me. I've been involved in the pixel lighting animated light show world since about 2018. It's when I really started getting into the deep end. I always say I kind of had a false start around 2016 where I kind of got into it, but I wasn't sure how deep I wanted to go. And so 2018 is when I really launched, and it's been, a rabbit hole ever since, right? So we get really into it. So glad to be here and talk about a few standard troubleshooting tips and going through the methodology, the deductive reasoning process, and how to just peel back the layers. I have a few like little text notes that I've thrown together, so I'll kind of refer back to these off and on. So first, I kind of wanted to get into and talk a little bit about some of the tools that are very handy and helpful, and I kind of consider a lot of this must-haves for any kind of troubleshooting, right? So, a standard multimeter, this particular multimeter that I'm showing here up in this corner, from Harbor Freight. They're like $6-7, something like that. I've got two of these. One I keep in my kind of build lab area, and one that stays in my portable go kit that I go when I go to travel to work on shows. So a multimeter is pretty much a must-have. You got to be able to check that voltage, make sure you got the right polarity, make sure you're not crisscrossing the positive, negative wires, which are all common things. In addition to a standard multimeter, I would recommend having a inline voltmeter, ammeter. This one here is from Amazon. Didn't mean to change page. Sorry about that. It's from Amazon, and then I 3D printed a little box. This is a picture of my actual multimeter that's in one of my travel toolboxes, and I wired it up with X-Connect ends, so you can plug this in either at the end of a prop. You'll be able to see the voltage at the end. Just plug it right in your X-Connect or Weiwu if you use Weiwu pigtails. And if you plug it in like between the controller and the prop, it'll also show the actual amp current draw. So those are very good troubleshooting tools to have at hand, because we all know that distance equals resistance. So as our wires get longer or whatnot, our resistance is higher, so our voltage drop occurs. So if you're, got 12 volt pixels, and at the end of your extension, you only have 8.5 volts as an example, that's telling you right there you've got too much voltage drop, and you might have to shorten that extension or whatnot. So voltmeter is a way to measure the voltage. If you can build a little volt amp meter, and I just happen to assemble this in a little 3D printed box with pigtails. It's very handy to just plug in. You can see exactly what's going on. In addition to that, we all know we may need to make pixel repairs, right? So do I got a pixel out? Not, a good soldering iron. And in the lieu of a soldering iron and solder, maybe using some of these solder sleeves. Quick note about the solder sleeves, and I do use a good number of those. The solder in these sleeves, these make for quick, easy repairs, but that solder has a lower melting point. And sometimes when you put your wires in there and you melt those down, they may or may not make as solid of a connection as possible. So I deploy a lot of these solder sleeves, but at the end of the day, a true soldered joint, if you have to solder wiring, is going to be more durable or longer lasting. So I have had sometimes not a great connection with these solder sleeves. They get warm as the current passes through them, and sometimes they'll kind of end up having to get replaced. So splicing, soldering, repairing pixels. Another quick, easy way, aside from the soldering, I know a lot of people shy away from soldering, is Matos has these 3-lock quick connectors that have you can connect and splice 3 wires at a time, right? You got our positive, our data, our ground, as well as xLights offers both the V1 and the V2 version of Clickets. So these are very nice for field repairs. I keep I got a box of the 3-locks as well as a bag of the Clickets in my toolbox, my go kit. Have them with me all the time, and really easy to make field repairs and be able to get out there and just click, done. So I kind of consider these types of tools, among others, pliers, screwdrivers, etc., kind of must-haves. Right? Anytime we're working on our shows, troubleshooting, why is this not working right? What's my voltage reading? And then, I got a bad pixel, I got to splice it. Kind of must-haves, in my opinion. Then there's other tools that are going to be very nice to have that I might consider optional. I personally consider these, non-optional, but understand that, not everybody will have this. So the first that we're going to talk about is pixel testers, the 1-port pixel tester. So through Matos Designs has this little dragon tester, already has an X-Connect on it. Like a little wall wart you can plug in. Or I also carry one of these, or two of these actually, batteries in my toolkits. This battery has both 5-volt out through the USB connector and 12-volt out through this barrel connector. So couple this battery with any of these pixel tester types, and that way I got a portable tester. I can walk out into the show. I got a strand that's not working right. I can uncouple it from the controller, plug it right in. And I got instant check with the 12-volt battery, or 5-volt if you're running 5-volt pixels. And I can, test that, and that eliminates any controller configuration or any sequence configuration. That tests, are my lights working? So, those are very handy. This second tester here is, I just pulled one off of WireWatts. So, most of our pixel vendors sell some type of tester. The ones with these little remotes are quick and easy and cheap, but you can turn on like red, green, blue. There's like a couple of standard things you can do with the remote. The advantage of like some of the Bluetooth type testers is you get a little app on your phone, and you can actually do some standard effects on there. So I use these little testers sometimes. If I'm going to a birthday party, I have a prop, whatever, and I'll just run that tester and just fire it up and have like a couple of standard effects going. So it kind of doubles as a 1-port basic controller as well as a handy little tester. So, these are optionals. Not everybody has them, but if you really get into your show for a while, you're going to have to, try to eliminate, because the problem domain of when you're running into it can be broad, right? We're going to talk a little bit about methodology here in just a minute, and, to help narrow down where that problem might live, right? Because we know that, there's a lot of layers to putting on a show like this, kind of like an onion has a lot of layers. And sometimes you just got to peel back those layers and circle in on it. So the testers like this are a really easy way to get right down to the root of the problem. The pixel testers up here, that's, will test your pixels, right? It's an output device to test the pixels. But another tool, and I have 2 of these that I keep with me, is this F-Test that was brought out by Pixel Controller. The team that brings us the Falcon controllers as an example, and Pixel Controller come out with this F-Test device. They're about $90, so certainly not as cheap as pixel testers, but let me tell you, this has saved many a show for me when I'm out there working on things and trying to figure out what's going on. The F-Test has many functions. It can be powered off of a micro USB, or it's a mini USB actually. And it's got X-shank pigtails in and out. But it also has RJ45 connections. So it has the ability to test smart receiver input, but also send smart receiver output, pixel input, pixel output. That's pretty standard. But also like DMX input and DMX output. And I don't happen to have any videos today of like walking through some of those tests, but there are a couple of YouTube videos that Keith Wesley had put out when they launched this product that go through the full functionality of these F-tests. My recommendation, if you're serious about doing a show and you want to make sure things work, get you an F-test device and have it in your kit. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars on our show, $90 for a quality tester that can show you what's really going on, show you the actual data coming in, and it's just a very handy piece of kit. Quick little story about F-test. We were having one of the charity shows that I co-own and operate, had more smart receivers. We've been trying to reduce it's very spread out. So we had like a lot of controllers, but trying to, manage the number of controllers versus smart receivers. And that's always, for people that start adding to the shows and growing out, that's always a common question. Do I add smart receivers or do I add controllers? But we had smart receivers and just having a fit with them, and with one particular, giving us trouble. So I used the F-test, and I was able to go, and it was probably a 75-foot RJ45 cable from the differential controller to the smart receiver. And I replaced the cable, and it was just getting bad data, right? The props were doing funky stuff. It just was bad data. And I was able to use this and go right at the prop, get smart receiver data in, and I can see the actual data showing up on the F-test device, and the colors and the representation of what the pixels are supposed to be doing. It was going wacky. All right, cool. So here at the end of my RJ45, it's bad data. go to the controller, coming out of the controller, bad data. Open the controller box, go right to the RJ45 port to this test. I can see I was getting bad data coming out of that controller port. Well, what we were able to identify real quickly was that controller had a bad, the differential chip that creates the differential signal to send out to the receivers. That's where the problem lied. That was a physical problem on that particular controller port. Well, we were able to we had it unused. So we moved it from, maybe it was 9 through 13, whatever port it was in. We moved it over to the adjacent one at like 17 through 20 or whatever the number was, right? We just moved it to the adjacent port, reconfigured the port outputs, boom, right back in business, shows up and running. So without something like an F-test to really see what was going on, we would have been just troubleshooting and digging and trying to figure out what is really going on. So a couple of my philosophies around troubleshooting is like, the shows that we put on, they're complex systems, right? There's so many parts and so many layers that go into them. But just keep in mind that a complex system is just the sum of simpler components, right? So once you break it down and peel back the layers, you're going to break it down into the sum of the components, and you want to eliminate things that are not the problem. That's just as important as finding where the problem is. And by eliminating things that are not the problem, that helps you narrow in on where the problem might be. I commonly think about when a problem exists, think about like a dartboard on the wall. And sometimes our troubleshooting techniques are, I'm just going to throw darts at the dartboard and hope I stumble upon the problem. Try this. Let's re-render and push, re-render the sequence and push, re-render the sequence and push. It still doesn't work. Well, obviously that may not be the cause of the problem. So let's eliminate the things that we know are not the problem. That's just as important as, and it helps you narrow your focus and really drill into where that is. I'm going to start moving into like some configuration things, right? So that deductive reasoning and being able to understand the different layers that are a part of a show really help you to kind of focus in and know where the problem's not. So I'm going to talk a little bit about networking for a moment. And I want to talk briefly about one of the more complex networking topologies that we see people deploy in their shows. And that's this topology of a separate show network and then using like a FPP device as a proxy. So the similar diagram to this is in the FPP manual. It describes this topology, but this is a more complex topology that, quite frankly, most of the time is not required or needed. But we do see a tremendous number of people set up this network topology and it's just like, this isn't working, so why is this not working, and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the flow and all the layers of pieces. In this type of network topology, you may have like a home network represented here in green, and my xLights computer might be wireless to my home router. Then my FPP device is wireless, and that's all part of my quote home network. And that's kind of in green, but then we direct connect to either a switch or direct connect to a controller as a separate network. Then we have to configure the proxy device. And in this picture, I've got an example of the xLights configuration. Make sure you have your proxy IP and then the FPP configuration. So I'm going to get more into live demos, right? So as we talk about troubleshooting and the things we have here, I'm actually going to get into live demonstration. I've purposely created some misconfigurations. So I'll kind of go through the process of, does this work? No. Yes. What can it be? And then we'll walk through that live. So I think I'm going through this kind of quick. Certainly, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to, make sure and let Bobby know. And Bobby, stop me if you have questions, if you see. So if I take this from a separate show network and I really look at the data flow, right? So I come from the IT background world. I'm a technologist. My focus is in data center architecture. I work for a large enterprise storage company. But I had a network engineer I worked with many years ago that made a statement to me that's just stuck with me. And he made a statement of, be the packet. By that means is like, follow the packet of information. I'm going to go from the origination source to the final destination, and I have to take a path. So in our lighting world, if I'm doing like FPP proxy, which is one of the more complex network configurations, I have my xLights computer on the left here. So we're going to talk a lot about testing from xLights. And the reason we test from I like to test from xLights is because it tests the entire flow of the packet from the output of your xLights computer to the input of FPP, then from the output of FPP to the input of my controller. And then I'm going to output the controller either directly to lights, or I'm going to output to like a receiver, which then outputs to lights. So we have many of this layers. So I try to draw this picture to kind of show how that data flow goes, because the more you can understand what's happening, the easier you can narrow in on where that fault domain is. And like we say, that's eliminate the problems that it's not. So I want to talk about testing from the controller. So if I test from a controller, and this, I took these images straight from this drawing that I actually did for, there was somebody who was having a problem on Facebook, I think it was. How, I can't remember how we got engaged. It might have even been through the xLights Zoom room, but I kind of, these IP addresses may have been their IP addresses, but just know that in a separate show network, I'm not getting in, this is troubleshooting, not really network setup, but there's two different IP ranges. So you'll see 4 and 192.168.4 and 192.168.100 on the different sides. So I just stole these pictures, but your controller can be COLP controller. In my demo, it's all COLP controllers in a Raspberry Pi. What I had available and ready in my lab to set up this scenario. But it can be Genius and Falcon, Hinks Pix, Alpha Pix, WLED controllers, whatever the controller is. If I test from the controller, then I'm testing the output of the controller to the lights. So if my test from the controller works successfully, then most likely my output from the controller to the lights is working fine. So, okay, I can eliminate that part. Then I can back up and test from FPP. So from FPP to the controller, it does not work fine. Then I know my fault might lie somewhere in here in this data path between FPP and the Falcon. Let's take a scenario. If I'm testing from the controller and it's not working correctly, it doesn't matter if I'm redoing the sequence in xLights and I'm re-rendering and re-updating. If it doesn't test properly at the lower layer of the stack, it'll never test properly at the upper layer of the stack. So understanding that data flow and following that packet of information, I'm going out of my, if I'm trying to just show my sequence through xLights and hit with the output to lights, I'm leaving the xLights computer, inputting into FPP, outputting FPP to the controller, outputting from the controller to the pixels. It may seem very basic to many of you, but honestly, the people we help sometimes don't have that visualization of how the data has to get from your mind into the sequence and out to the lights. There are many things in the middle. So that's kind of the end of the slides that I threw together for now. So we're going to refer back to this a little bit off and on as I go through that. So I think we're doing okay on time. I know we want to kind of keep these to 45, 50 minutes, maybe an hour. I might go a little bit over. But a little bit about what I've got set up here real quick. So I've got I did set up a separate show network. I don't normally run separate show networks in any of my shows, but that's very common, and that's where we see some configuration issues. So we'll kind of use that as our example that we'll walk through and see if we can't make some things work correctly. For the keen eye, as we look through the setup I have here, some people may already recognize a few things that are right or not right. So, purposely, I have some misconfigurations just for demonstration purposes, right? And as I go through the process, I may skip steps that we would normally do because I'm trying to demonstrate the process and why something may or may not be working. So don't follow my steps right now as a golden rule, just that this how we're going to walk through things and kind of make some mistakes that we see other light show enthusiasts make regularly. So my setup is I've got kind of a Raspberry Pi show player. He's a player only, and he's set up as a proxy host. And I got 2 controllers in this scenario. So I happen to have another Raspberry Pi running FPP with a Pi hat on it that outputs to a couple of models. And then I have a K8 that outputs to another 3 other models. So I got 4 models total. If I look at my layout, I've got these models actually set up in my demo environment. If you've seen my previous classes or my previous videos, you may recognize my trees I have set up. I added another little guy here just to have some more models to kind of go through and troubleshoot with. It's pretty simple setup at this point, and controllers. I am not currently at my location where my lab's at, so I do have an IP camera in a new position so I can see the actual model. So as we go through and do our testing and our outputting, we can see live real world kind of what's happening. In my web page here, I just have the show player. You can see he's on 2 different networks, right? Wireless to my home network per se, and then wired to a separate network. And then these guys are all operating through the proxy. So I'm able to access these guys through the proxy service configured like a separate show network. Somehow I saw that guy on the wrong page. So it's back up just a brief moment to here. We talked about testing from the controller. So testing from the controller, for me, it's like, okay, do lights light up? Yes or no? So let's just go to my Pi here real quick. Depending on the controller you have, most of the common controllers we utilize, even going back to the older controllers of many years ago, have a test function. So familiarize yourself with your particular controllers, how to get into test mode, how to get out of test mode. Different controllers have different functionality in their test mode, but all of them you should be able to just go to test. In FPP, under status, control, display testing is it. So just open up display testing. He'll automatically be configured for the channels that this instance is configured for. And I can just smash enable. And by default, he should be doing an RGB pattern. So let's take a quick look over. If I hit the right keystroke, I can see now that my right tree over there is going through an RGB cycle pattern. Let me throw some white in there, right? So RGB white. Now as you go through red, green, blue, white, I can just set their pattern. So that's all I have configured on that controller. So yep, that's testing as I would expect. So by default on FPP, when you go in for testing, you have cycle. You can also choose like individual fill. So I just want like a solid color. So let me just turn this on to like red and red only. Take a look. Yeah, that's red. And this just coming in here and enabling it should test everything that's connected to that controller. If you're a Falcon controller, I don't have one part of this demo environment, but I have one here. So on Falcon controller test, you have different test types that you can do. If you just want to do a standard, I'm going to do a chase. If I enable, then any pixels on these ports should be enabled. Falcons, you can test individual ports if you want. I just want to test port 3. We're going to go more into port testing when we get to testing from xLights. So my initial testing from the controller is, hey, does everything turn on I expect to turn on? Yes, no. From a Genius controller, similar testing that's available. Go to the testing tab. This is just a Genius 16 port. And again, you can turn on and off individual configured ports. You just enable all into a test mode, and anything connected to that controller should be going through whatever test pattern you have selected. So most of our controllers have a test method. My initial test is go to the controller. Does everything turn on? Yes, no. Cool. Then I want to move up the line when we talk about our path. All right, so let me test from FPP. In this setup, all I have actually connected are FPP controllers. So we were just kind of testing from within FPP in this scenario, right? I'm not testing from my show player at this point purposely. but that's available. But just test each controller individually, and then I move to xLights testing from there. Because if each controller individually, something lights up, I know the output of those controllers is outputting light. I did not do that same test on my K8. So let me go to status control display testing, just turn everything on. Let's take a look at what's happening. And I can see that I still have testing going on over here at the Pi. Let's turn that guy off. This, and if I just do a single color, that's all red. And okay, wait a minute, not everything's lighting up. Okay, well, but it's coming on, and I can turn test off. They go off. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to switch to that screen. So they go off, test to come on again. They come on, but not everything. Right? Maybe I have a misconfiguration. Let's take a look. So let me look at the output configuration. Input output setup, channel outputs in FPP, or it's different on your controller. This is a K8, so I'm going to the K8 tab. I can see I got a tree and a star configured on port 1, and I got the spiral X and the alien on a differential receiver, and they're on port 9 and 10 for that differential receiver. The spiral X, and he's configured for 450 pixels, and I know that that's correct. And then go to xLights, go to the layout. I can select that model. If I hover over it, he'll tell me the number of nodes. That's 450 nodes. And my controller is configured for 450 pixels, but I'm not seeing 450 pixels light up when I test him. All right, give me a clue something's wrong. So let's go. Let's keep following the path and see if we can tell kind of what's wrong where. You can always manually add more. Okay, maybe there's something, and maybe it's misconfiguration. So we can always make it like 600 pixels and then retest and see if I have any different behavior. If it still stops at the same point, then you know it's not a pixel count problem. Right? So I come in here and I can save, and I can I can save and retest and save and retest and change that. And in FPP, I increase this count, which throws my channels off. And this is just showing that I have an overlap right now. I purposely created that, but you can always manually just add more pixels. And then if you still only see the partial, let's just do that real quick. That's if I go back to testing, display testing, just enable everything. Channel number looks okay. I can only see part of him lighting up. So, all right, well, that's maybe it's misconfigured. So let me go over here and we'll just make it 600 channels, 600 pixels, excuse me. Let me save that. And if this was the wrong pixel count, this should now be outputting more pixels. But if I go back to test, when I make modifications, it kind of turns the test off, which that's fine. And it's still exactly the same spot. So it's not a pixel count problem, but if that were to increase, then I know my count is off, and I may have to go back to xLights and reconfirm that my model is defined for the correct number of pixels, right? Because maybe the model had more pixels than that. Maybe the actual physical prop has more pixels than the model's defined for. So if my model's wrong, that can help identify that. That's not our case here. Right? Cool. So, turn testing off and go back. And I'm going to actually from xLights just to set that back to what I know it's supposed to be. I'm just going to re-upload output to the controller. Upload output takes the configuration in xLights. So if I go to visualizer and I can see, yeah, this is how I have things connected. So I'm plugged into the right ports. If I upload output, then I'll just reconfigure that output page. If I go back here, input output setup, K8 tab, you can kind of see I'm back to configure to whatever xLights had defined, right? xLights is our source of truth for that. So we manually changed it to test to see, is that my problem? Well, it's not. All right, cool. Let's move forward. It's still in test mode. So let's get this guy out of test mode. And I'm like looking, and I'm like, I'm also noticing like red is red, but I have a color difference going on here. what's causing that? So, okay, note to self, there's another problem that we have to chase down. Let's fix one problem at a time. So I'm going to go back. Let's just turn test off here for now. Display testing, turn off. All right, well, I know something's kind of up, not quite right. I'm actually going to take a look here at my flow. So from, in this case, FPP is my controller. So from my controller, I'm not getting some things right, but we validated that the outputs look correct from what we believe we have plugged in xLights. So let's test actually from xLights. So let's go all the way to xLights and try to test all the way through to see if we get the same result. So troubleshooting is a process of elimination. All right. Well, I know there's a problem. I don't know where it is, but let me follow through. And I'm going to be able to do some testing in xLights that I can't easily do directly on the controller. And then we'll see if we can't figure out what our problems are. Because so far I'm observing two problems. I had a color order issue, and then I have not enough pixels lighting up. So let's take a look at what testing is available to us in xLights. And I want to just temporarily flip to my notes here, make sure I'm not investing in anything. Oh, we in the networking world, we'll come back and talk about some of this stuff. So we're testing from controller. Now we're going to go into xLights testing, right? So my opinion, well, there's a function in xLights to be able to test our shows that is quite underutilized, and I find a lot of people are not familiar with it. But it's very powerful, and it's very good. So let's talk a little bit about the tools that we use to help troubleshoot our show, right? All right. So I'm going to go to the tools menu and go right up here to test. So there's a test functionality that's very powerful, built right into xLights. So let's use it a little bit. For those who are not familiar here, it's two halves. The right half is which tests do we want to do. The standard tab is useful for like AC functions and stuff like that, but basically you have a background and a highlight intensity, and you can change those, which is, it's basically from here, it's either an all on, all off. You can kind of chase or alternate between the background and the highlight. So for standard pixels, this tab, not terribly useful. Can be useful, but not necessarily. But the RGB tab is more static. How I test with what I refer to, let's go to background and then change our background color. So these are first channel, second channel, third channel. So this should be red, right? This should be green. This should be blue. And of course, if we set these anywhere in between, that should be whatever resultant color from what we have selected here. I'm just going to throw that guy up at red, this guy all the way down, this guy all the way down. That should test red on our pixels, right? Our first channel for every pixel based upon what is selected on the left-hand side. So the right-hand side is which test type. The left-hand side is what am I going to test. So where I find very helpful is let's start at the models tab. The models tab shows all of the models in our layout. You'll notice I have one here that says unavailable because that model is not currently assigned to a controller. It's not associated with the controller. So when you have a model in xLights that's not yet configured to go onto a controller, it's going to show up as unavailable. And there's really not much. I can't click on them. I can't really test something that's not configured. But a model shows me all of my models. And I can actually expand these guys, and I can go to submodels, and I can turn on individual submodels. And I can actually come down to the individual nodes, and I can turn on individual nodes. All right, so cool. Let's turn on the spiral X and see if we get any kind of output. So basically, the spiral X is selected, and I should be just getting a solid red on the spiral X. Let's take a look. I'm not getting anything anywhere. Another value of this tool is when I select an individual model, that model and only that model should light up, nothing else. But nothing's lighting up. All right. I'm outputting the lights and I've got that selected, but nothing's showing up. Let me go back and review back to, okay, I'm coming from xLights now. I have to go to FPP before I get to my controller and my lights. So I'm outputting from xLights to see if I'm inputting into FPP. So flip to FPP. This is the show player that would be the guy in the middle. And I can see I get a message here that I'm receiving DDP data from this guy, but I'm not showing any data as being received. All right, that's a common issue we see regularly. Let me check that the input is enabled. So, all right, so I have to input into the FPP in this scenario because I'm following the data flow. Go to, oh, that's not enabled. Let's enable that and see what we get. Cool. Save that. In FPP 9, by the way, a lot of the configuration changes are kind of more live. Historically, in older versions, after you make a change, you have to restart FPPD. Sometimes you might still have to manually restart FPPD, but for the most part in 9, it should be kind of a soft restart. So let me see if I'm getting anything outputting at all now. No, let me go back to my status page. Then go live update status. And he's receiving data. So is he outputting data? So this kind of test is going to be, because I'm doing multi-sync controllers. So it receives into the show player, but it's not going to output. All right. So again, back to our data flow. I'm going from the xLights to my proxy device, but then I have to output real-time data to my controllers. So in this scenario, my controllers, so, okay, I'm receiving in now. Am I outputting? Well, let me check outputs. So outputting from here to these other controllers is over network. So let me check outputs now. So inputs are enabled, and I can go to the status page, and I can see now I'm receiving data, right? I'm live updating, I'm receiving data in. Cool, fix that problem. But now I'm not outputting. So go to channel outputs. So in an FPP or in a multi-sync show where you have like a player and a remote doing multi-sync, there's not a configuration to output the network data to those second controllers that are in the separate show network. So, and we don't have any outputs configured here, right? This guy is just, you know, he's a show player device. I don't have anything configured for output because he's supposed to be multi-sync. Not to get, you know, this isn't the networking class to get into those details and all, but normally he's telling the other guys to play show. So testing from xLights may or may not be enabled because we don't have our outputs enabled. All right, well, let's fix that real quick. So normally for multi-sync controllers, you want the active setting to xLights only. To troubleshoot our issues, I'm going to temporarily set these controllers to active. Because we want to make sure we can test end to end. Then I'm going to do an FPP connect. Active means I'm now going to expect those controllers to actively receive data over the network. So in order to do our end-to-end testing, this has to be enabled. Sometimes we have to enable this temporarily, even though it's not going to be enabled to run our show. And to enable that, we're going to pick our show player. We want to make sure and have our UDP out set to all. If you're doing like Falcon's Genius, Hinks Picks, Alpha Picks type of controllers, those are an active controller. So you need your player to send all active data over the network to your active controller. So we're temporarily configuring these guys as active controllers. And that should just take a moment and okay. That shouldn't have happened. Why is this guy not? 2508. It completed that time. We got that error message at first. I was not expecting that, truthfully. So that error message basically gave us a 404 error, meaning they couldn't connect to the show player to do that update. But the second time it did work. Down here at the bottom, you can see upload complete. Let's go back to our web page and double check. So my outputs, I'm just going to refresh. All right, now I got my outputs enabled. and my output. So now this guy is going to send data from the FPP device to our controllers, in this case, Colt controllers. Cool. Let's go back to xLights test. We're working through the layers, right? Be the packet, follow the packet, peel back the layers one at a time. Models, turn on spiral X. Boom. Am I getting anything lighting up? I turned on the spiral X, but my illegal alien's lighting up. Oh, that doesn't seem right. Interesting. Well, let me turn on the illegal alien and see what happens. Oh. Well, I'm getting the wrong model when I choose the right model, so something ain't quite right. All right, let me now move to the controller tab on testing. So now I can look at the individual controllers. I can go down. I know that I got the port 9 and port 10 are used. I can expand these and see that. So if I click on port 9, the illegal alien's lighting up. And if I click on port 10, I can see that the spiral X is lighting up. Well, I bet I have those backwards. So if those are backwards, go to the visualizer. I guess I'm actually plugged into the wrong port. I knew I was plugged into the right port, but I swear I'm plugged into the right port. But the test proved that they were plugged into the wrong port. All right, let me reconfigure that. Upload output. I made a configuration change. So I'm going to hit save. My upload output. I didn't see the completed down here, so I just did that. Let's go right back to test. Let me test those ports. Go back to the K8, port 9. I'll just do 9. 9 is supposed to be now the illegal alien. Negative illegal alien. If I turn on port 10, that's supposed to be, if I expand this out, I can see the spiral X. Oh, I have port 1 turned on. I didn't mean to turn on port 1 as well. That's fine that I did, but hey, it was working. Oh, I got the whole thing now. So that whole problem was because I just had the wrong thing plugged in the wrong port. I can turn on both. I can go into test the submodels. So even from the controllers, if I expand the spiral X, I can go to individual nodes. I can turn on like the first 3 nodes. Right? Where does it start? It starts right there, whatever. But if I go back to the models, remember, and go to the spiral X, I can turn on individual submodels. So front spiral. Yep, that's the spiral. Let's do the spiral big. You know, that looks like a loopy spiral. I'm going to test all the individual models. Let's turn on ball 3 and ball 4. This is very handy for showing. Let me turn some of these things. Let me turn everything off here and just turn on a couple of the balls. You can see I get those particular balls. So this is extremely handy for like faces, submodels. Did I wire my prop correctly? Because another common problem is the way that I push the pixels in the prop and added the pixels may not match the way that the model's configured in xLights. But if you can come in here and test, you can turn on individual pixels. You can turn on specific submodels. This is a fantastic way of drilling in and testing. Do I have my wiring correct according to the model in xLights? And I can do just the head. I can do, this guy doesn't have a ton of submodels, or I can go in and turn on, you know, individual lights. I got another sample we're going to get to, hopefully, if we have time here in a little bit. I know we're about 10 minutes from top of the hour. So very handy are the models. You can turn on individual models. We found our port discrepancy. Red's red. Turn on green. Oh, wait a minute. It's supposed to be green, but he's blue. I can see in the color back there. Let me check over here. Oh, now he's green. So if you get different colors than you expect, this is a good way to test my color order. Now, again, from the xLights doing this, this gets us all the way end to end, right? From xLights to my Raspberry Pi, to my controller, to that. So is it a controller issue or an xLights configuration issue? You know, I know I got a color order problem. Let me go take a look. Well, there's a couple places to set color order. I know my illegal alien is the one with that color order problem. Why it purposely I don't remember setting this to RBG. Why? Evidently, maybe I used different pixels on this and I had to set the color order. When I'm just going to remove the color order and try to set that back. I know everything in this controller connection section. Whatever you set here, if I define a brightness, if I define null pixels, and these options vary depending on the controller that you have that this model's associated with. So I was defining a color order, but these are RGB pixels. I don't need a different color order. So in this case, I'm going to change that. I want to re-upload outputs because I know those settings require an upload output for them to become effective because those settings apply to the controller. Quickly back to test. I'm rushing through some of this stuff. Now let me I'm not getting the output. I did that upload, but I'm going to go ahead and also do a restart APP down here just for the safety's sake. Because I noticed my test was not outputting. I need to go back to xLights. Sorry. Tools test. Models, alien. And now my green is green. I had a misconfigured color order in that scenario. So if it wasn't in the model and not within xLights, then you have to go look at the controller. You got to kind of peel back those layers and go and test your colors from the controller itself. You can also, the display testing here, I can go and select individual fill colors. And I can say, okay, is red, red? Yes. Is green, green? Yes. Is blue, blue? Yes. So another way to test the color order from xLights or from the controller itself, depending on the controller type you have. Sometimes testing color order from the controller is a little bit more difficult. Let me go back to my little note section here and kind of catch up, make sure I'm covering all the topics I kind of wanted to real quick. Individual models, the controller port. Oh, the model testing in xLights. So another, in that same test window, I can go to an individual model. Let me turn this guy off. Let me close this and reopen it so it gets back to my output to lights. Tools test. Did I turn off testing in here? No, I did not. If you leave your controller in test mode, then it's not going to receive data from xLights. So make sure your controller is not in test mode if you don't need it in test mode. All right, cool. So another great help that we have, and I want to switch over to one of the cycles. Cycle just means that whatever I select is going to cycle through red, green, blue. You can kind of see in the background, he's going to cycle through red, green, blue. Another way to spot color order problems is turn on like the ABC all, and this should be in color order. So look for white. I'm going to do ABC all none. And then we're going to look for black. So now they'll go in order: red, green, blue, white, red, green, blue, white. So we use this RGB cycle test quite a bit to help identify color order problems to make sure things are going in the correct order. I've got this turned up a little bit to change. You can change the speed on how fast that changes if you want. Anyway, but let me turn that guy off and go to model. So now I can pick individual models and I can say, I want to click and drag, and I can highlight certain pixels. As I highlight those pixels light up. If I shift, click and drag, I turn them off. So I can go to an individual model and say, I want to just light up his mouth. Now his mouth is testing. And that also really helps you find problems with singing vases, with wiring problems. That if I light up a certain set of pixels or a matrix, this is fantastic for a matrix. I don't have configured here. But if I draw, if I want to say, I want to do, everything here is like a simple straight line, then I should get a straight line of pixels actually lit up. So on a matrix, if I say I want to light up this vertical line and it's all zigzaggy, then I know my matrix is not defined correctly according to the way that it's wired. And again, I can shift select to turn pixels off. Sometimes you might want to say, let me turn on an eye, because sometimes it looks like the eye is singing, right? We've had miswires where the mouth is supposed to be singing, but the eye is what's singing. This helps you really pinpoint and find props that are wired differently than your models defined. Fantastic test. And very powerful testing here. That you go down to the individual pixels. To further test beyond that, I suggest also just in your layout, create an animation sequence. Just create a new sequence. Just hit done, get an animation sequence. Grab the bars effect, and like drop a bars effect. You should have like an all or an everything type of group. So just grab a bars effect and turn on a handful of colors. Have that motion. If I turn on output to lights, I should now be getting motion, and everything should be moving up. All right, so yeah, that looks fine. If I turn cycles down to 0, it stays static. So you see the tops of these should be white, these should be red, green, blue. Does this kind of match? My tops are white, red, green. Yeah, that looks good. Let me change direction. So, up and down is the direction, but always do like an up or down, your choice, and then a left or right. So now let me do a left. If I turn my cycles back up, I want to get these guys all going from right to left, 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 from right to left. What's going on here with this tree? Everything's moving right to left, but this guy certainly looks like he's moving from left to right. He's not moving the same direction. Interesting. You can speed that up or slow it down by adding the more numbers of cycles, slower cycles. You can speed it up, slow it down. All right, let me change this direction to right, so everything kind of moves to the right. But now this tree looks like he's moving left to me instead of moving right. We might have found another problem. So a tree basically is like a matrix. Just to showcase what this problem is, I'm also going to move to like the text effect. And just throw in some text on like school, because we're at night school right now. Let me turn on a few. Oh, I don't want that on all. I want that on that tree. That's the left tree. So let me actually move this down to the tree left is the one that we're seeing some weird things. Maybe make this kind of scroll off a little bit. I'm going to slow him down a little bit. Maybe make him like a speed 2. And so I should have that word school scrolling across the tree. But when I look here, he's scrolling to the right and my letters are backwards. All right, so not only is, and this is timing out, let me get this over. Yep, you select that. So it should be scrolling left with the letters correct, but he's scrolling backwards. So you see this problem with matrices, with trees, with similar product like that, where maybe it's wired backwards, right? It seems to be going backwards. The key is you want to kind of know where your starting point is. So matrices, trees, those kinds of models, right? When you define the model, you define the number of strings, number of lights, number of strands, and then the starting location. Now in these trees are starting location top right. They're configured for top right. So top right's where it's supposed to start. That's the tree left. Let me go to test, go to models, go to tree left. I'm going to expand that out. I'm just going to turn on nodes 1, 2, and 3. Where are those nodes? Oh, they're over here on the top left, at the top right. So I just turned on the first 3 nodes, and I can tell, and if I turn those nodes off, there's number 1, and he's going to go down. So it's horizontal wiring. He's going down, and he's going down on this left side. So evidently he starts top left. And yes, those trees are wired backwards from each other. That's why they're in my lab and not out at a show instead of pulling pixels. So let me go ahead and change him. So we just figured out that he's top left because we used that test. We turned on individual nodes and he's actually top left. That was great help. Let me configure him for top left. Go back to my sequencer, turn on that text, outputting lights. Let me zoom back out. Now my school's going the right way and it's actually readable. If I copy this and throw it on the right tree as well, I can see I got school flowing across both trees. So we found another problem where my tree was wired differently than what I had configured in xLights. That's a lot of the demonstration bars test. So bars tests are always handy. Make a bars test, upload it to your controller. Networking wise, I know we're kind of running low on time. Networking can be a complex subject. I know that we have in the future coming up soon in night school, we're going to have an advanced troubleshooting class. I believe John Spiker is going to be your instructor for that class. And I'm not sure the topics he's going to cover, but I know he'll get pretty deep in the advanced class. But just know in networking, you want to be able to figure out your computer IP address. Use the tool ping to be able to ping a device on the network. That's a troubleshooting tool for networking. Ping sends out an echo request and that device echo replies. So it's a way of a quick, basic, low-level networking. Did that device respond? If it responds, you know that you have a communication channel between those devices. If it doesn't respond, you know you have networking problems. That's maybe why your thing's not working. I talked about show network and those complexities. Another thing around networking is know your network that you're configuring, the subnet mask. There are like some common Wi-Fi extender mesh networks that configure a different subnet mask than is most common in home networks. So in most home networks, there's going to be 255.255.255.0. But on Eero meshes specifically, the default configuration is going to be a 255.255.252.0. So it's your router in your network that defines your network scope. And if you misconfigure your subnet mask when you're configuring a controller or your Raspberry Pi, you may not be able to communicate with it because your subnet mask is misconfigured. So there's a lot of things that go into what's the right subnet mask for your network. Just know how to try to get that. And if in Windows, the most common, go down to the tool here, do a CMD for command prompt. And then we're going to run a command prompt tool called ipconfig, all one word, ipconfig. And you can see your IP address and you can see your subnet mask and you can see your gateway. So a lot of times we'll look at your computer to get those details to help define your home network and just make sure when you're configuring interfaces for your home network, like the Wi-Fi of the Pi, that you make sure that your subnet mask is the correct subnet mask for your network definition. I can get into more some FPP multi-sync and all, but maybe we'll come back in another class and have some further. But I'm going to be mindful of everyone's time tonight. So Bobby, I don't know if we saw any questions coming in live or if you had any questions, anything specific that we'd like to see cover and how to troubleshoot common misconfiguration issues and do basic troubleshooting.
No, Ron, there weren't actually any questions in there about the class. Actually, one thing I was wondering, though, you had at the beginning, you were talking about the voltage meter that you have.
Yeah.
Would you be able to provide like the which one it is that you got like in Amazon and your maybe even your file, your STL file for the
so
anybody can make it then?
For printing that particular box, I'm happy to supply that. I don't know how you want to get it to people. If I send it to you, Bobby, would you be able to like attach those into the comments of the video or something?
I'm not sure, but I mean it's something that even I'm interested in myself.
Yeah, I'm happy to supply that. So if I go to Amazon and ammeter is what I kind of looked for. An ammeter is a meter that measures amperage and all kinds of different things. But these guys, I bought like a 2-pack, and this 2-pack's like $10. So this guy's really cheap. When you go to the link, last purchased in August of 22. That's when I built that guy. And I actually built a couple of them, and I actually gave one to another show owner. And there's a bit of a wiring diagram associated, depending on what meter you get. And ideally, we understand wiring diagrams a little bit, at least at the basic level. And I just followed the kind of like this wiring diagram, and I tied directly into pigtails. I'll have to go dig out the STL file, but I'm happy to display it to you, Bobby. Yeah. And anyone else who's interested, comment on the video wherever you like, if you want that. And maybe we can, I'm not sure if we can attach files to like YouTube contents.
Well, we can probably put it like a Google Drive and share it that way.
Yeah. So I found that box originally on Thingiverse. It was a box from somebody else. I kind of sliced it and cut it and made it a little bit taller to fit that meter in it. So it was a shallower box. So I kind of sliced it up using Tinkercad online.
I just figured that since you already created it.
Yeah. I'm happy to share what I have there. There's another box that another community member had designed, and I had printed one of those in a rough draft as well. So I made the second one, and it had like a rounded bottom. It was a little bit smaller, more concise, easy to kind of hold in the hand. I don't have that STL, but I know that there's some out there. I believe that one might be on Thingiverse somewhere, but I'll send what I have. Absolutely. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
And I might refine that wiring diagram. It's been 3 years since I built that, so I'm sure I've got a wiring diagram somewhere. But I had always envisioned this box is not deep enough, but you can always put like a pixel in here as well. And then like you can split the data so he doesn't actually consume a data spot. So I thought about remaking one and putting a pixel in there, and that pixel would be the same as whatever the first pixel in the wire is, because you can wire that in parallel. I think some other community members back when we were making these did do one with the pixel in it. And I thought that was a really good idea. Well, not my original idea, but it's certainly a great idea as well. And that way you can get a pixel in this box and you can see what at least the first pixel is supposed to be doing. That'd be handy. But yeah, I'm happy to share that. And I'll share the link to the specific ones that I bought here and from Amazon as well.
And we got Randy here saying he's been doing a show for almost 10 years and still come across issues. Tips tonight will greatly help him identify issues without having to go to the Zoom room.
Yeah, the key I wanted to present was the methodology and how to peel back the layers and how to troubleshoot, which is not it's not an automatic thing in a lot of people because they may not have the clarity of the complete. As I was thinking about what to cover and understanding the data flow and how everything has to connect together and what layers are involved, and I thought that was very helpful, trying to teach the methodology behind troubleshooting, not just you got this problem, fix this problem. You got this problem, fix this problem. That's like throwing darts at a dartboard, which is great, but sometimes we run into unknown problems, and that's the key. If you have a known problem, execute the fix. Next. Unknown problems, determining that is kind of what I tried to present today. So hopefully it helps everyone out there. And no matter how long you've been into it, it's interesting to see the testing capabilities that are available that I find interesting, that in people that we help and work with all the time are not aware how powerful this test tool right in xLights is. It's not available on your phone if you're outside. That's where laptops are handy. You can go out there on your actual show with your laptop and you can turn things on and off. Every show I set up, I'll go out there and I'll go through every single model. Is that the model I want it to be? And I'll just sit here and go through every individual model on every show that I go set up. And it just helps you identify those misconfigurations, the plugged in the wrong port kind of things very quickly. All right. Glad those tips hopefully will help you as you're setting up your show. I'm here coming up soon.
All right, Ron. Well, thank you very much. I know you probably want to go and watch your game.
I'm here for the community. The game's secondary. So yes, I'm a fan. Yes, I'm missing it. That's okay.
They're winning. I see they're winning. So
yeah. Let me check the phone. Like I haven't even been paying attention. So Oh, 10 to 20. Go Chiefs. Brian McVeigh, I know, is not listening right now, not paying attention. Go Chiefs.
I mean, you know, I'm a Bills fan, so you know, I unfortunately I am rooting against the Chiefs because
I'm fine with that. Go Bills! You know, hope to meet them in the playoffs. That would be nice. I love those games. Great games between those two teams. Yep.
Oh yeah, they're always a shootout, especially at the end.
Yep.
All right, Ron. Well, thank you very much for coming on again. Very insightful information that you have, and as Ron did say, we will have John Spiker on next. He's actually going to be on next week. He's going to be going and doing more advanced troubleshooting and work, you know, figuring out problems for your show. Again, thank you for tuning in, and see you guys next week. Be good, do good. God bless. Go Bills.
Well, that's it for tonight's lesson in light-based lunacy. So smash that subscribe button, zap a comment below, and share your worst tech fail. We might even feature it in the next class. Until then, stay lit, stay learning, and always remember to bring a backup SD card. Night School dismissed.